Welcome to Wisdom Work, where we talk to people who are integrating their work selves with their spiritual journey. I am your host, Quinita Robertson. I work with the divine feminine to bring forgiveness and reconciliation to the world. I earn more than I want doing what I love in service to the highest good. In this podcast, we ask the question, which do you choose, change or transformational growth? The choice is yours. This choice will make the difference. This choice has the power to move you from stuck to inspired, from pain to joy, isolation to community, theory to practice, and from ordinary living to extraordinary living. I so love that I get to introduce you to Rhea D'Souza, who is a dear friend and I'll say colleague, even though we've never really worked together, it still feels that we connect there. But for me, the important piece of who you are to me is I often say you're my twin on the other side of the planet, and that we met in 2015 at a Global Conscious Leadership Summit in India. And I often say that our mothers brought us together because we got into a conversation. It was like the 5th anniversary for me, right after the 5th anniversary and coming up on the 5th anniversary of your mother's death when we met for the first time. And this trip was kind of mysterious anyway. Like, I didn't find out that I was coming to India till like a month before. And even when someone invited me, I'm like, I was invited in the pickup line at my kid's school. I'm like, nobody gets invited to India in the pickup line. I'm not going to India. Well, a month later, I'm in India talking with you. And I remember even saying to you, oh, you're why I had to come here. You know, you were one of the biggest gifts, not the only gift, of course, there. But welcome to the space around wisdom work where we talk about, you know, integrating the people who I know who have integrated their work lives with their spiritual selves. And one of the things I most appreciate about you, Rhea, is that I experience you as living awake. That, you know, you are a facilitator, but you're also an artist in lots of different ways, singing, dancing, painting, writing, you know. And to me, art is the bringing spirit here to the ground. You know, there's some indigenous cultures that don't even have the word for art because it is just the connection of spirit here. And I experience you in so many ways in that way, and also in our friendship, you know, to be able to witness you and be witnessed. I said to you once that when you meet someone who's you on the planet, it changes everything. Yeah. So just a thank you. And I want to open the space for you to share a little bit about, you know, what are you up to these days? Who are you?
Thank you. Thanks, Vanita. I think I went back memory lane to that time and day, and next to the Ganges, and just that connection. Uh, and yesterday was my mom's birthday, and here we are.
Yeah.
So that story continues. Uh, what am I up to these days is well, for the longest time, I have watched and learned from nature, but not spoken about it uh, in corporates, because they're like, it's a lot easier to talk. Let's talk strategy. Let's talk this. Let's talk that. But it was in the background. But in the last year and a half, I feel a lot more ready and confident, having implemented and seen uh, using nature's ways and lessons, essentially biomimicry, which is emulating life. That's what biomimicry literally means.
Yeah.
Mimicking life. And being kinder and gentler in the processes of transformation, to know them as a coexisting phenomena. Like I constantly, I've been doing this work for many years now, and it always felt a little bit incomplete, that how come we have to do this work alone, and it just doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
Where do I take this working alone to? I mean, I have to go back to people, so why not involve them in this journey? So how do we have our tribe? And that's one of the things that I've had with you, is to feel the sense of tribe. um, so that's what I'm up to these days, to see, learn from nature, ask how nature does this, translate it back into the work that I do, and offer it. And most times it's amazing. So my dream is, we have more biomimics, you know.
Yeah.
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 So, what do you think has drawn you to like integrating as part of what I hear you speaking to? Like more and more parts of uh, yourself and your work. I think that so often, and I know I did this too, like I held almost like my organizational development self separate from my spiritual self. And at a certain point, realized like, what the heck? Like, what would it mean to bring all of me, right, into the work that I do? And trust that there's a place for that. And that we're all basically looking for the same thing. We all want to be seen and heard and witnessed.
Yeah. Yeah. I, so part of it was um, this notion that it may not be understood. And I'm saying notion very deliberately. Um, but it isn't. I mean, this is my experiment, right? I did not want to, uh, just did not want to be irresponsible by introducing this to a set of people who I imagined were not ready. That's one. Two, I mean, I think of myself as a bridge. I think my purpose in this life is that of a bridge. Given that I have studied engineering and I also practice art, so that making these two worlds see each other is a constant endeavor. And but they're not separate. In my head, they're not separate.
Yes.
Now, it's preposterous to even think they are separate, right?
Yes.
Like any artist can tell that. Like if I'm when I'm singing, there's a meter, there's a structure,
Yes.
right? When engineers design whatever, design.
Yes, there's art.
There you go, right? Like
Yes.
I don't understand when we we learn to take sides of our left brain or right brain, and you know, but this dividedness was no longer feeling right for me, you know, and I was like, more. I felt I was inauthentic when I did that.
Mhm.
Like okay, this is this part and this part, and just did not feel right. But at the same time, I'm being gentle in the introduction.
Yes.
Like there are certain leadership workshops with corporates where I have introduced Kabir. I sing Kabir.
Yes.
Um, so I've sung that, and initially people would be like, oh, "Where did that come from?"
Yes.
But I think it did something. It stopped people thinking temporarily, and people felt, because when you're confused, you can't move, and
Yeah.
there you are. Then you have to surrender to the experience of it, and eventually I found people take to this. Right? There's something about that poetry which helps you hold all the other stuff together.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it invites us into art always for me, invites us into like you said, our feelings. It invites us into um even the essence of who we are,
Mm.
especially in a time where we're so like out of balance in the do. Art invites us into the be, right? Like it's like uh there's no wrong way to do art.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can't screw it up. And so, and I think in this time of like I say we're such a culture of adolescent adults
Mm-hmm.
and the wanting to grow up. It's this movement of how do we move from childish to childlike?
Yes.
And that means like for so many of us equate art to our childhood because it was a time that we felt freer to be able to just make things up and do things, you know.
Mm, mm, mm.
Matter of fact, I have a niece and Evelyn, and I was the last time I was visiting her, she has a new little sister who I don't know at that point if she was so thrilled that this new being was in the house, but her new little sister, Luna, um, I had visited them on the way up. I was doing a job past her house. And then when I came back, I stayed and just spent time with Evelyn. And we're playing in her room, and she has this play kitchen set in her room. And she gets on the bed with like her gazillion stuffed animals. And she says to me, sing a song about a cat.
Uh-huh.
And I say, I don't know a song about a cat. I said, you sing one. And so she does. She just goes and starts singing about this cat, and he goes up a mountain, and he goes like all over this place. And then he starts getting eaten by this dog. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? So like, but but what struck me in that is, when did I stop making up songs about cats?
Mm,
And her inviting me into her world helped
mm,
to re-invite me into my own.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
And I think we get to do that in the places that we're going into, you know?
Yes. I think we underestimate play and simplicity and joy uh, as portals.
Yes. Yes. Portals to connection,
Yes, yes,
portals to
portals.
healing, portals to what else?
Yeah. I mean, in that line in the Bible, which says, the kingdom of heaven belongs to children. I think he meant more
Yeah.
by saying that, right? Like, uh, actually, this today, later in the day, I have been invited to hold an interfaith dialogue
Mhm.
for young adults and children, adults. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking how wonderful. I mean, I have no idea what I'm going to do,
Yes.
but Spirit knows, so I don't need to worry.
Yes.
I need to show up and be willing to listen and play. That's it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but how I think we're confused in these definitions of what growing up means, right?
Yes.
Then we emulate some behaviors which we think are grown up, and
Yeah.
so this becomes, oh, this is not okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually have found the places that I thought would least be open to some of my integration of art into the space, or the listening for the moment and the emergence that can happen,
Mm.
are some of the people who, for me, have been the easiest.
Mm.
Because what I think is that they're not under the misconception that they know.
Yes. Yes.
And, but the people who I work with who I think, oh, they do this all the time, they'll get this. They're actually usually the ones in the most resistant to
Mm.
surrendering to the moment of play,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so like uh where's a place that just surprised you
Mm.
or about how it showed up, or what it looked like in the moment for you or felt like?
Mm. Um, so what's coming to me is this thing that I was called to do in one of the organizations I've been working in, and they are in order to work with each other better, they decided they needed to become like a club. You know? And so they kind of got a lot of people together, um, introduced the idea, and the people were not sure why. I mean, club is generally an initiated thing, right? Like people decide we want to form a club, and
Yes.
then they form a club. And this was somebody telling them you should be a club, therefore you can get along. So it was a little weird. And yes, of course, clubs work and clubs have so on and so forth norms. And what we had a design and everything, and the design came through literally like in one morning, because nobody knew how to do this, how to get people to want to be part of it. And these are all scientists.
Mhm.
And I was sitting there. I was in an ashram in Coimbatore in a jungle. That's where I saw these two jaguars, by the way, a couple of months ago. I happened to see jaguars, and I think they jumped on my roof in the night.
Ah,
Um, it was another experience, but I'll come back to that. But the next day morning, I was sitting, and there was no signal there, and so I had to make notes, click a picture, and hope that whenever the signal comes, it will reach the client. And and as I started to write, it it just came. The whole plan just flowed like that, you know. And
mhm.
um, but then it is still a plan, right? And so when I ended up going there, um, there were people murmuring and they were saying, "Why are we here? I mean, you know, we have other things to do." And there was this and that, and why club? And I don't want to be a part of club. And da da da. And then I had to introduce, and I got up, walking towards the front of the room. In those few seconds, I literally had no idea what's going to come out of my mouth when I start speaking.
Yeah.
And I thought I will say something while I was sitting and making notes. But when I got up, my mind just went silent. And I've learned now to not panic in those moments, but just rest. And I stood there and looked at the room, and some of my friends laugh at me. I'm a joke in that sense. They're like, "You stand there in silent, and people are waiting for you to say, and you know, and you takes forever to start speaking." And I'm like, "What can I do? Even I'm waiting for
Yes.
the spirit to speak." You know.
Yes.
So and so I the what came out of my mouth was, "How many of you have been part of some club in childhood, or you've
Yeah.
started some clubs?" You know, that's it. That was the question.
Yes.
Suddenly, the room transformed into 10, 12, 14-year olds.
Yes.
And suddenly there were examples of, "Oh, I had a library. Oh, I had a comic club. Oh, I had this club. And oh, I started that." And people just started to associate club with fun and solidarity that they already did. There was hardly anybody who was not part of some club or the other.
Yes.
The entire energy of the room moved, you know.
Yes.
Now their association was linked to something which they knew was nice.
Yes.
And now you have an opportunity to do that in a whole different setting all over again.
Yes.
And that was like the click, you know. After that, I really didn't have to do anything, honestly.
Yes.
They just took over. There were some people who had been the presidents and they took over and they did this. And that's it. There was the energy that was needed in the room. Then it was a matter of just like guiding that
Yes.
energy, little nudges. But that's it. And
Yeah.
they're doing, it's been 2 months since they've just taken up so amazingly to that whole idea that they are just working for it. You know, like I feel my job is done.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that, I have one of my teachers who says the shortest distance between two people is a story. So
Mm,
what I heard is you invited them into the story of it, right?
mm,
Their own personal experience that then
yes.
connected them to their feelings of it,
Yes. Absolutely.
and how beautiful, like, uh, and then it's like, oh, we could have that, where and before when they heard club, they were thinking, why would I want to do this?
Yeah. It feels like extra work, you know?
Yes, yes. Instead of that it might be for you, not not required something of you in that way, like, not as the
Yes.
lead anyway, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
it's
they've gone ahead. I mean, it's such a fun example. So in the initially we did the whole thing. We set the norms. There was voting done I mean, a club means you have to have a president and you have to have a
yes,
secretary. Like that's a thing.
yes,
They had the president and the secretary, but then the word president and secretary are also heavy, right?
yes,
They immediately
yes,
they say no, Ria, we don't feel like that. We want to change the name. We wanted more this, more that.
yes,
And I get that, right? So in the following up meeting, when they were holding it themselves, and I was
uh-huh,
very clear that they did not need me. They were doing it. I was there.
yes,
Anyway, I introduced some methods of renaming, and they came up with wizard.
yes, I love it.
We are
Yes,
the delivery wizard and we're the delivery captain. And I was like, here are these amazing scientists and people who have PhDs, are into deep science, and you are using the word wizard. I was
yes,
like thrilled. You know,
yes,
they're bringing their whole self to the whole thing,
yes,
right? So
yes.
much more beautiful and more integrated.
And invoking themselves that magic that can happen, right?
Yes.
Like when we give people permission. So often they're just looking for permission,
Yes. I think that's
you
the,
know? It's like, "Can we really do this? Is it okay to do this?" "Yes." Like, "You can do it and have fun.
yeah,
It's okay."
absolutely.
I think so often that, like you're saying, the ideas that we have of what being grown up is, you know, I was hosting a group and we were using archetype cards, and one of the men picked the prostitute archetype card. And his response about when he was speaking about this card was he thought that was what it meant to be an adult, is to
Oh,
sacrifice yourself
oh.
for others and family. and
Hmm.
and so like and then I thought, oh my goodness, how many of us think that? Because I know there's been places where I've
Mm,
thought that, that's the grown up thing to do, is you sacrifice yourself
right.
for whatever it is that you love, instead of let's like evolve our idea of what loyalty really means.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I think an immature form of loyalty is you sacrifice your life for the king.
Yes.
But the mature form of loyalty doesn't ask that of you. It really understands that we are all connected. And if I'm
Mm,
honoring me, I am honoring you.
mm, mm.
Yeah. Mm. Hmm. So
Beautiful.
I know you to be a wise woman. And I think, this whole idea of wisdom work is, how are we bringing the wisdom into our work? And I hear you speaking to that. Well, what
Mm.
are some things, work or otherwise, let's open it up a bit,
Mhm.
some wisdom that you think is needed now in the world?
Uh, well, I think there are a couple of things, Kunita. Uh, I mean, part of why biomimicry is we are the way we understand nature is as if it's our property. You know, this book, one of my most favorite book, Ishmael, and he tells the story. It's a gorilla teaching a human being. And that's the gist of Ishmael is the name of the gorilla. And he talks about how we have a story which is running inside of us, which we are not even aware of,
Mhm.
right? And it's a myth of creation in which he says, "Tell me your myth of creation." This gorilla is telling this man, and he says, "What do you mean by myth of? It's not a myth. It's real." You know, he's like, "Yeah, sure. I mean, that's how it's going to sound like, right? Like it's real." And he says, "Go on, tell me." So then he says, "Which version?" You know? Now you can tell Big Bang, or you can say Adam and Eve, one of the two at least. And he says, millions of years ago, this happened, then this happened, and this happened, and then there were amphibians and blah blah blah. Man appeared,
Mhm.
and then he stops,
Mhm.
right? And the gorilla's waiting. He says, "And?" and there's nothing more he has to add. And he says, so you're telling me this entire universe brought everything together just so that man would appear one day, right? And he says, just look around, look outside the window. Do you see evolution having stopped? And the man looks outside, and obviously the answer is no. But we think that's what it is, right? And therefore, in the way we talk about it, say we have to take care of our planet. Like it has become my property,
Yes.
so I have to take care of it, even though it is good intention.
Yes.
But
Yes.
we own it,
Yes.
right? And something about that is very disturbing, very childish,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I keep telling people, look at your feet, and you will know who holds whom.
Yes. 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 I was saying to someone earlier today, this piece about like we've made product of almost everything.
Yeah.
And we don't realize we are nature.
Yes.
Like, like that nature isn't something outside of ourselves,
Yes.
that we're part of it and part of the whole. And that, part of it is this whole idea of this myth of independence that we carry.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yeah. And it just doesn't, like, part of I think my life is about helping us people see how we are nature,
yeah.
you know. And hopefully then we don't treat it like that.
Yes.
We don't treat ourselves like that, or we don't treat the earth like that, or nature like that. And it is so, it's everywhere. I mean, our seeing has to shift, I think, I was telling you a little while earlier about psychodrama that I'm learning, etc. And I was thinking how photosynthesis, how nature does this every day, use light and carbon dioxide
Yeah.
to create food and oxygen. It
Yes.
is the gist of all our transformation. The stuff that is not working for me, okay, bad,
Uh-huh.
carbon dioxide. But if you bring light to it, it can turn into sugar and oxygen for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Like if you bring up our stuff, okay, carbon dioxide is not bad. Like we think it is bad.
Yes.
Like stuff about me which is not good, I try to keep it inside. But if you hold it back, you'll die.
Yep.
And at one point, carbon dioxide is just oxygen which has done its work, and now no longer is needed. The stories don't need to hold back,
Yeah.
right? At one point, they did something to me, but now it's an out breath.
Yes.
But if I let light fall on it, it can convert into something more beautiful. It can feed the earth. It can provide oxygen. Like just that one lesson, even photosynthesis.
Yes. Yes. I
Day
love
in,
that.
day out, monks are doing.
Yeah.
But we, in a way, like if I'm a plant, then that's what I would do, right? Bring up my stuff, my carbon dioxide.
Yes.
Let light fall on it, right? The light of spirit, the light of awareness, light of friendship, like we have. And suddenly, I mean, I've had so many our morning calls when there was a sudden ray which falls on that something and it transforms into something else,
Yes.
right? Not just for me, like because of what plants do, they end up giving oxygen to other beings.
Yes.
So if I'm doing my work right, that oxygen is there for others as well, right? So
Yes.
there you have your interdependence. You can't do your work alone,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
So I feel, I think we need to do more photosynthesis.
Yes. I love that. Bring in more and more light.
Yeah,
It's so interesting because one of the things that you and I were talking about before we got on this call, is the whole idea of water and light, the sun and the water. And,
yes.
and that there's a ritual that I've been doing that's that actually has the candle for the sun and the glass of water for the water, the two pieces that represent light. And it has you mark around the rim, the north, south, east, and west corners. And then in the center, dip your finger into the water. And then you do my mind supports me. And you do it
Mm,
4 times. And it's to align our minds with what we're doing throughout the day. So it's this daily ritual of getting an alignment internally,
wow.
using the sun and the water, which represent life.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm going to try that ritual out. I mean, it's like the last, as I was telling you, last 2 3 years, 3 4 years actually, this newfound relationship with the sun. um, and I joke, and people joke that about me now, that I'm heliotropic,
Yeah.
wherever,
Yes.
wherever the sun comes, I turn towards that.
Yes.
And
Yes. I'm
but
that way with water.
so funny. I mean, it's but not just. I mean, we have cultures in Indian culture. You have the Surya Namaskar, and you have this. And at one point, many years ago, I used to do sun worshipping, which is, or sun gazing,
Yes.
and that changed the way. I mean, which is in the morning, the first rays of the sun, you just look at the sun directly, because that at that angle you can,
Yes.
and just take it in. I mean, in India, at least I know that there have been morning offering water to the sun, which is essentially, in my mind, the same thing, which is you look
Mhm.
at the sun in the morning. But it changed the way my relationship with food. Like, I didn't feel as hungry. And I was wondering, why is that? And essentially, food is like, between the sun and the food, there are some 20 layers of food falls on the trees, and then you cook them, and then you eat, or or the non-veg route, right? But if you cut this down and directly take energy, you don't need to go through this rest of the other stuff. You know?
Getting from the source.
Yeah, yes, eating from the source.
Literally. Yes.
Literally, literally. But it definitely does something, even scientifically, they say this. There's something that when you sit in the sun, there's something called as neutrinos.
Hmm.
There's a blog that I've written about this, interestingly, that, and they're called ghost particles because they are smaller than the smallest particles, so they're invisible, but they're there.
Yes.
It has been There have been ways in which it has been found out. So you get a blast of neutrinos in the sunlight, and they're going through you, but they just don't go through you, right? They alter your DNA in some very specific ways, right?
Yes.
But if you're present to that, it just adds to the whole thing, I think.
Yes. It's so interesting because I'm learning water gazing.
Ah,
And so I love that you're speaking about the sun gazing, as I've been holding the sun and the water together just recently in my own ritual practice. And so it'll be interesting for me to see and even to speak about like what are the different things that come to
mm-hmm.
us in those spaces. And I would be curious too if there's like a different quality depending on whether it's sun or water,
Right.
or a different, not necessarily quality, that's not the right word I want to use. It's different information, different kinds of information that would
Mm-hmm.
come through the sun, which is more of a masculine energy or can be seen that way, and water, that's more of the feminine energy or can be seen that way. If the messages we are getting are flavored depending on which one we
Yeah,
focus on.
yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to see it like that. The beautiful paradox. Rhea, my name means the moon.
Yes.
One of the meanings. It's the moon, one of the largest moons of Saturn, and so there is this relationship,
Hmm.
right? Uh, and Rhea is also the daughter of the sky and the earth in the Greek mythology. So there is the bridge again.
Yes.
right? Um, and this time, I mean, this time when I was in Chennai, as I was telling you earlier, first time in my life, I saw the sun rising from the ocean. And so my association of the sun has always been mountains, because you draw like that as children,
Yeah.
and then you click pictures of the setting sun. And I did not even perceive there to be a different reality until I went to the east. And there I saw the sun rising from the ocean. And it was just, it, I cannot explain. It felt like it's almost like an anti-gravity in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what is it? Right? And one of the things and this reminds me of what you were saying about water gazing, that sun, my sun, not the sun, was always like a mountain, solid, steady, rock solid. You say like that.
Yeah.
It used to be that kind of sun. That's how I experienced myself also. Last few years of being in the ocean and the depths of it,
Yes.
my sun now rises from the ocean.
Yes. I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speak one more line or two about what that means to you. Because I think I get it, but I want
Yeah.
to hear.
So earlier self, the last few years have been quite a churn in many, many ways,
Mhm.
relationally, after my dad passing away, me entering the grief work, and so on. Um, 8 years ago, if somebody told me someone people would reach out to me to hold grief circle or hold grief, I would really never believe that person. But I do. As of yesterday, in an organization, something happened, and they reached out to me saying, "We don't know how to hold this. Can you?" And I don't know how to hold it either. But I know how to surrender. That is what I do know, and I know how to wait. I know these two things. Um, and so the last few years, I have had to watch water, enter the water, and parts of me feel like I belong there many, many years ago. I've seen it in dreams. Um, and in some ways, that was the place which felt safe, the ocean. With this all moving and deepening and connecting, and the ocean was always there, right? Like even before the land showed up, it was the ocean. Ocean was everywhere, and I felt like that, right? But in the last some time, and especially this time, something feels like my own energy seems to be rising, powered by that churn of the last few years. You know, I'm no longer afraid of the depths of the ocean. Um,
Yes.
yeah, something.
One of the things I've said is I think that most of us would consider ourselves pretty compassionate people, but we have forgotten the connection between our own grief work and compassion.
Yes.
That our own grief work gives our compassion depth.
Mm.
We can't give what we don't have. And
Yeah.
so if we don't have an understanding of the care and compassion and love that's required for us to have for us in that process, we don't have that then to give to another,
Yes.
you know? Mm. One of the things that I remember thinking, because I held a grief circle that you were in at one point, and it's kind of interesting for me to hear you say that that you've been in the water, but you haven't, or like, as a doula yourself, deaf doula even, and being in those transformational places, which require water, like,
Yes.
which require grief.
Yes.
I wonder if some of it is what we think grief is,
Yeah.
like, and there is a surrender though,
Yes.
when the grief comes to take you,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is different.
Yes. Yes. I think the bit about the art, and I'm glad you brought the doula thing out. Um, ah, in those moments, most of those moments, I have no memory.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Like I cease to exist in those moments.
Yes.
Something happens and something is over. Then sometimes other people have to tell me, oh, you did this or you did that.
Yeah.
And part of part of it is my assumption has been, and some of it still continues, that I just don't have words, for
Yes.
it. I have
Well,
the experience
yeah.
of it. And I think that's where art is such a big part of it. Like words only reach one place, but art can go everywhere.
Yes. One of my teachers think it said, when we think trauma is the biggest thing, or terror is the biggest thing, art is always bigger,
Mm.
you know? And I think part of it is when we get to these sacred experiences and these sacred moments, there are no words that can
Yeah.
describe it. So we go to metaphor. It was like,
Yes.
because there's not really a description for it. And I think, you talked about like not remembering. That to me is what it means to really be in the present moment. Because if
Mm.
I'm here, present, and then I'm here, present, and then when I'm here, present, what happened before doesn't even exist to me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've really let it go. And so I've had that, like, people will tell me I've given them like coaching assignments and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I gave you that. That's a good one. That's down. Like, because
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Um, and that like there's a there's a mm, the past and the future don't exist in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, I feel there's this poem by Orion Mountain Dreamer, no? Invitation,
Yes.
right? And in the one line in that where she says, "Can you stand at the edge and shout to the sliver of the moon?" Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's like the moment, like on the edge of, I don't know, and there are so many such moments, right? I don't know where I end and the other begins.
Yes.
Um, I don't know. I mean, there have been, as a holding space for birth and death, there have been animals. Last month, I was in a workshop and teaching Enneagram, and we went out, and there was this disturbance in the room. People not willing to let go of something. Something was going on, and suddenly, smack! You heard a voice, and there was a bird which had hit the glass,
Mhm.
but it didn't survive. Unfortunately, it fell on the ground, and then I had to pick it up and do the ritual for this little bird, right? But then that thing changed many things, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So honestly, many moments I don't know what it means to be a human being. There are moments I can, yeah, I have just silence after that.
Mm.
um, we can feel it. I can feel it in my body, like, when people cut trees. Like I had such a traumatizing experience. Like, I wept and wept and wept, and when people were cutting trees last year in front of my house, and I had to like go fight and all that. But I was like, yeah, I mean, you can smell it,
Yeah.
the cut trees. There's a smell of cut trees.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more piece and then we can start to close up.
Mhm.
One of the things that I'm noticing and would just like to hear your input on it. There's this thread that I'm noticing around truth,
Mhm.
and our ability to be with and hold and live truth that I'm finding so missing. And I think some of it is, we hold this message that like you have your truth and I have my truth. And so we can start to believe there's no real truth with a capital T.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think some of what our challenge or our task is how do we grow our capacity to include as many truths
yeah.
in our assessment of what is true as possible.
Yes.
And just, how do you hold that? What are you seeing that piece yourself?
Yeah, yeah, I do, Kanita. This as a as one of the facilitators for deep democracy, that is a fundamental tenet of the deeper democracy holds majority and minority.
Hmm.
How and there are times when I forget also, but then I catch myself in the like, okay, what am I feeling a reaction to? Like, what am I feeling a resistance to?
Hmm.
Okay, and as Star Wars would say, enter the resistance.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, how how do we do this? What is the piece of truth which is the opposite,
Yes.
right? And part of this work, this Robert Keegan work, and he's written a book called The Evolving Mind. It talks about the vertical development of the mind, and he says, some not the exact number. I'm not quoting the exact thing, but till a few hundred years ago, life expectancy was about 50 or so.
Hmm.
We have increased by 30 years. Nature does not do anything with an ROI without an ROI.
Yeah.
So it must mean for us to do something with the extra number of years in the way our brain evolves, right? Evolutionarily talking as an anthropologist. So he talks about the level 5 mind, which is can hold opposites with equanimity.
Mm.
To grow into the fifth mind, to be able to hold polarities with the same way. That's what we are growing into,
Yes.
right? So to your point about how can I have not take sides? There are no sides on a circle, right? Like how can you have
Yes.
sides on a circle?
Yes. Yes.
um, and that's the piece where I think poetry and art meet, because Kabir constantly has been talking about let's meet out beyond the right doing and the wrong doing. There's a place.
Yes.
I'll meet you there.
Yes.
Like the third place, the
Mhm.
third point of view.
Yes.
What is this third? This quest of, okay, I see this truth and I see it. What is the third truth from where we can see this?
Yes.
And keep, I think some time back, I had this one practice of being unoffendable. Okay, just to try out. Like how many times I choose to get offended. Like we can get offended for
Yes.
anything.
Yes.
Somebody did something, I got offended. Something happened, and I think when I get offended, I disconnect from the oneness, because
Yes.
then now there is a you and there's a me,
Yes.
and we're separate.
Yeah, I often will say I don't get offended. So, I mean, like, I don't know even if like if I've ever really said I felt offended. That's not the word, for
Mm.
me. Because to me it's like that purely has choice in it,
Yes,
you know? It's like,
yes.
and it's not, we so often think us, if I'm offended, it's about something someone else did, but they could do the same thing and I could not be offended. So like, you know, so this piece about how often and the different ways that we hand over our own agency,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's challenging, you
Yes.
know, because I think people, in my head, I would use this metaphor, like when we are born, imagine that we are like a 10,000 pieces jigsaw, which has my face on it. And it's broken into tiny, 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 tiny pieces. And as soon as we are born, it is thrown onto the world. And everybody picks some pieces up.
Yes.
And my job is to take these pieces back and reconstruct this me but nobody has the full picture.
Yes. Yes.
And I don't know who has the peace.
Yes.
So when I think of it like that, my listening in that moment to those people is that much different, because there's a piece I know, I definitely know you have, that is mine. I
Yeah.
don't know if you think I have yours, but if I miss it, I would miss that piece.
Yes. Yes. Mm. And that each opportunity is a gift.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
uh, the world is out to gift us and not to get us.
yeah.
And we ask different questions. So then we're curious. Like I often, so when I'm doing my traveling and my work and my trips, I often will call it, I'm going on a treasure hunt because I
Yes,
know there's treasure, right? Like, or I wouldn't be going. And so I get really curious about what's the treasure I'm going to find here.
yeah, 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 yeah.
That's a little play. And,
That's the play. That's the
you
play.
know, yeah.
And sometimes, but there's the other side to it also, that sometimes if I cannot be with a person 100%,
Yeah.
I can't be with that person. That is the other thing.
Yes.
Like, uh, there are people who are upset because of that.
Yes.
And I get that. I
Yes.
get that. I totally understand, but I want to be with you, which is why I'm not being with you.
Yes. Yes. And to trust that there's a gift in that for them too.
Yes.
Like I don't have to figure that all out for you. I just have to
Yes.
be clear about mine. And because we are connected, if I am tending, again, back to that, if I'm tending to myself, I am tending to you. That's what it means to be connected,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know? And I don't
Yes.
have to be your God. I don't have to figure out what it is you need or don't need from me
Correct.
because I
Correct.
can't. Yeah.
Yeah. And those relationships, one of that is you, Konita, where you get it. It's something you had said many years ago. I think like to be seen or held by a giant, something to that
Yes.
you say, and I
Yeah.
found that
I often
extremely.
will talk about I go giant hunting.
Yes.
For the other giants who can really see and hear me,
Yeah.
because again, that witnessing piece,
Yeah.
how can we, and if I'm not willing or able to see and hear myself in those places, I can't see and hear you,
Yes.
you know, and some people don't know they're giants, right?
That too.
And so they go around and we can like, one of the things my teacher taught me, like when giants pick on little people, they're just bullies. And so we can
Mm.
be giants who don't know that we're giants and don't know that the other people don't know. They're not,
Mm.
they don't know that they're giants.
Yeah,
And there can
yeah.
be the bullying that happens. Right?
Oh yes, that's so resonates. Yeah, people
Yeah.
who don't know they're giants are not willing to accept their bigness,
Yes.
then they end up bullying.
Yes. Yeah.
Such a sad way to
Well,
express your giantness.
well, and I think one of the things you spoke about before that I hear in this moment too is this whole idea of the good and the bad. Like
Mm.
I think the whole idea of good and bad is actually the human piece. That's
Yeah.
right. That we kind of, because I think that to me the divine is just love and it just is.
Mm.
It doesn't decide good and bad.
Yeah.
We have choice. And I would tell my daughter, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. It's not necessarily good and bad because evolution does happen, right? There is
Yes.
a process, there is consequences to actions that we do. And so it can be easy or hard, but
Yes.
not necessarily good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And this thing, yesterday I was having this one coaching session with a bunch of people, and somebody was talking about, but I'm struggling with acceptance, especially with regards to my child. How can I accept? And I, the first time I heard it like that, I was like, "Whoa, what is your choice?
Yes.
You know, he is your son. I am in this country. This is the weather. This sometimes I feel like, and this is where I think words, even though I write and I blog, I still find words, and this
Yeah.
is the paradox of it, right? This word acceptance, we present it or think about it as if it is a choice.
Yes.
So I can accept or not accept. I mean, how? Okay, the
Yes.
weather is going to the dogs over here. It's so crazy hot, but I must accept it as if. I mean,
Yeah, the
it's like
choice. It's like it's like
right?
you can be in resistance about the truth of what's happening, but you're
Yeah, yeah.
still living in it.
You're still living it, right? So does it make you feel better to say I accept it? So it's a linguistic trick,
Yes.
this whole thing, right? But
Yes.
if you and I think that's why we're not able to get to it because you're already there. You
Yes.
can't get to where you are.
Yes. Yes. And I think it's that adolescent part of us,
Yeah.
again, that wants all of the freedom and none of the responsibility.
Yes.
Because if, what the whole idea of not accepting means
Correct.
well, it's
Do
not even
something.
deal with it because you're still dealing with it, right? Like, but it's like, it's this whole idea as if, I don't have to carry the responsibility of
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
required
Yes.
in it.
It's a way of thinking which gives you an out.
Yes. Yes. Uh,
But if you drop that, this is where you are. This is, yeah. You don't have to agree. Like I accept
yes.
my, you accept him.
Yes.
Yes, but I don't have to agree with everything, and I can
Yes.
disagree, and that has nothing to do with this. And I think because we use these words, no, and this is where I think as people who do this work, who have the mic for a few minutes,
Yes.
if you did not have this, I accept you or don't accept you, we wouldn't be struggling to want to belong.
Yes. I think part of that is we don't get that we're birthed from belonging and that we
Yeah,
return to it. So you can never be separated from belonging.
exactly. Like how can you not belong? How can you
Yes.
unburden?
Yes. And I said, if we really got that, it would change everything,
Exactly.
because so much of our actions are trying to, and I think we mistake fitting in for belonging.
Yes, yes,
And fitting in is transactional,
yes.
belonging isn't. Belonging
Yeah,
is relational.
correct. I mean, if you just saw the misdefinition or the lie of that definition, I'm sure if somebody said it in one context. In that
Yes.
context, it may have meant something. But
Yes.
then we've stopped. I think we don't even think.
Yes.
Not that we don't feel. We don't even think deep enough.
Yes. Yeah, and we think that, I've often said some of the people I think who think they're the most logical are actually the most emotional people I know. All right, like,
Absolutely.
because if we're not tending to it, it's tending to us. It's like,
Yes.
ruling us in ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. We also give away power with that,
yes.
right? If
Yes.
somebody says, I don't accept you, I think it is true. I mean, and
Yes.
then I.
Yes. Instead of I don't need your permission to. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be hilarious to
Yes.
watch this, sometimes, if you're
Yes.
not caught up in the thing of it. It's like, oh my God.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to speak to?
Oh, oh. I think just one thing. I know this is something close to you also, and I see this in this adolescent culture. We don't have elders.
Yes.
We don't have enough elders in this perpetuating youth as opposed to the wisdom of that.
Yes.
We lost. People don't know where to go, so they go to the sources.
Yeah.
Um, we need places where elderhood is not just invited but also celebrated.
Yeah.
We can look to people instead of years later look at an encyclopedia and see what was written by them.
Mhm.
You know, but it's also about some of the people who refuse to acknowledge their. I'll be turning 50 this year. I've been wanting to turn 50 last couple of years.
Yeah.
Last year I celebrated, I said, hey, and my son reminded me the maths of it. He said, no, not now, next year.
Yeah.
I can't wait. till I get 50, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, and I think we need that part of us which knows the wisdom, the elderhood.
Yes.
Uh, we we do all kinds of things with it, you know. So we're refusing to grow up essentially as a result,
Mm-hmm.
as people. And perhaps we need to address that, you know, in different, you know, like because I work in organization and some educational places. How can we have just stories of elderhood? What
Yeah.
is the wisdom you can listen to? Because that I can tell, like my grandmother continues to play a grandmother even today, even though she's passed on
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And I mean, now that I'm talking to, I realize this whole thing about nature and biomimicry for me came from her.
Yeah.
Right? I learned patience like that. I mean, this is like a funny story about something. I was in class 1 and I'd asked for a book or a compass, I don't remember what. And she said, I would keep asking when, and she said she would give some date and I wouldn't understand how many days is it or hours. And then one day she just got a pot. We had a big garden and she gave me a couple of seeds in this little pot. See, this is your pot, and put the seeds. And then she bought this wooden scale, okay, ruler, and she put it in
Mm-hmm.
the pot and said, when this plant reaches this mark, then. And so now I couldn't ask her the questions. So I
Yes.
would every day morning run to the plant and say, oh, it hasn't come up yet. Oh, it
Yes.
hasn't come up. Oh, and she told me not to touch, let it take its own
Yes.
course. And I'll tell you, Konita, I still remember the 3-4 weeks because it would come up and I was like, oh, now it's coming up. And I expected to go straight like the scale, but it didn't.
Yeah.
And it would do its own little thing. But I learned that nature has her ways
Yes.
and I must follow it
Yes.
back then. So this is my grandma's wisdom, which continues
Yes.
in ways.
It's the learning how to move at the pace of nature.
Yes.
You know, we want things, we want to plant the seed and have it pop up right there, right? But that's not how nature works. And we're nature. Like, so, so what is the pace of nature or the pace of grace that
What's
is
the
being asked of us in each moment?
yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Ah, yeah.
Well, thank you, dear sister friend. Oh my goodness. I just love being in conversation and relationship with you and like knowing you're on the planet.
Thank
So
you.
grateful.
Me too.
Uh,
Just
yeah.
knowing that you are holding the other side of the world that way.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I so that's why we had to be on opposite sides of the planet. Um, so you
Yes.
can hold the world up that side and I can do this one. And how, what are the odds that we would have found each other this lifetime, right? That,
Mm,
all the miracles that happened and that had to happen for that. I'm just so grateful. Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that we will do is we will post and I'll get from you links where people can reach where you are and what you're doing and what you're up to. And again, thank you for your yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonita.